Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading property experts as they share with you the insider's guide to property investing.
All right, folks, you're on the Property Couch, your insider's guide to property investing. I'm Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle channel, and he's very excited that it's the brand new year.
Happy New Year!
He's Ben Kingsley, the chair of the Property Investment Professionals of Australia and the 2014 and 2015 Property Investment Advisor of the Year. Mate, you've obviously had a good year, have you?
Wow, big night, big day, feeling good, up and about.
Yes.
Can't believe we're doing this.
I know. And a perfect time to be doing New Year's resolutions.
Yes.
I wonder how many people have broken at this stage.
Already.
Yeah.
What about the ones who are going to sign up for the gym memberships?
Yeah.
They're going to be the best. They're my favourite. 90% of people who take on gym memberships. There's a HSBC ad that's pretty cool at the moment. I saw it on a flight recently. And it's, I reckon we'll see if we can find it on YouTube and hang it up there. It's just about all these people who haven't followed their dreams.
Yeah.
And it talks about basically gym membership. It talks about musical instruments. So it takes you through this museum of...
Have you been looking at my New Year's resolutions, have you? Because I haven't done any of those yet.
So that's what I've been sort of fluffing around with. So we'll see if we can find that and put it up because I think it's a great ad. But it talks about acting, taking charge. So 2016, the year that you're going to make change in your life. Are you going to get into property investing or are you going to buy another one? Or are you just going to watch your asset base grow?
Well, hopefully the listeners have been researching over the Christmas and festive break. They've read some good books that are out there on the subject.
There might be one book that we probably think, we worth plugging. What's that? Armchair's Guide?
Armchair's Guide to Property Investing. Hopefully people have had a read of that. But obviously a new year, fresh beginnings, and January's traditionally pretty quiet.
Yes.
A lot of real estate agents take a lot of time off during this time. So we thought it would be good to get our next guest in because as we start to move into ramping up into the buying season, Paul is going to be very, very popular. G'day, Paul. Welcome to the couch.
G'day. Thanks for having me.
Now,
Thanks for coming.
Now, Paul Baker runs a business, Independent Property Inspections in Melbourne. Essentially, he's the builder that I refer to when we buy down here in Melbourne because we want to protect our clients from buying something that's, let's be honest, if the structure has any issues with its integrity, we want to know that. So, mate, I thought I'd open with a story. Last year,
Yep.
I got you to help me with a property in Spotswood. I'll probably test your memory here. It was a beautiful single-fronted across the road from the train station. We were interested in checking out the property and had some foundation issues.
Yes.
Down
I
the
do
side,
remember that.
down the side of the property, and I went to the auction, and it was a football crowd. There were so many people there. It was in the middle of winter. It was freezing, and if I hadn't have got you in, I would have been one of the guys trying to bid at that auction.
Yep.
But because of the inspection you did, we found out that the footings were shot.
Yep.
Heaps of money. So you said, mate, I can't recommend it highly enough to back out of this one, which I did. But interestingly, the person who bought it turned up on the day and just bought the property with no inspections.
Yeah, wow.
No due diligence.
It'll be interesting to see what happens with that property in the future.
Well, they might need you and your building company to help them underpin the
Absolutely.
footings.
So Paul, in terms of footings, because we all know re-stumping is something that needs to happen for some homes, what was it about that property, if you can remember, that because sometimes re-stumping is not that expensive, but in other cases, so what was it about that one that sort of made you think this is a no-go?
Well, that one was a little bit different than just re-stumping because it had an external brick wall that sat on a footing, not on stumps.
Ah, there you go.
So internally, the place looked fantastic because it had been renovated and the walls looked great. But when I went around to the side of the house, to the neighbour's side, and I looked at the brick wall had movement in it, and they're quite large. So it raised a few red flags, and then as I investigated further, I realised that there'd been rotational movement in the footing, and to repair that, there's a fair bit more work. It needs to be underpinned. You need to have access to next.
So tell people what a footing is. That's the concrete that sort of sits under where you lay the bricks on.
Yeah. So this particular property had a strip footing, and it all varies to the different areas. But normally they could sit 400 or 600 deep, and they go the whole length of the wall, and that's what the brick wall is built on. and then there's stumps internally with bearers and joists that the floor sits on. So it was the stumps had subsided somewhat, but the actual strip footing down the side of the house had turned with a bit of rotational movement, and it was affecting the wall. And it was a bit of an issue to repair.
Massive issue, because effectively you can't get to it. I mean, you literally have to rip up the side of the house to redo foot. I mean, what would they do engineering from
Yeah,
that
so
point?
you don't actually take that footing out.
Yep.
What you do is you underpin.
Okay.
So you and it all needs to be engineered and
Yep.
drawn up, and
Yep.
building permits would need to be obtained. But
Yep.
you would have to, be on pretty good terms with your neighbours, and you're going to dig up the side of their house, and
Wow.
So
what sort of money are we talking for that? Just as a ballpark in terms of what did you roughly
Within a
put on?
$50,000 range.
Yeah.
yeah, it was substantial. So,
So 50 to 100 G.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, no, not so much. Probably around 30 grand to underpin it.
Okay.
But then depending on the wall, whether
Yep.
that needed to be rebuilt as well.
Yeah.
Once that had been done. So the house wasn't going to fall over by any
Yep.
stretch, but at some point, it was never going to get better. It was only going to get worse.
Well, the interesting thing about that house is because me or the team are talking to you on direct dial at least 2 or 3 times a
Yeah.
week. We're obviously no builders, but we know what to look for. So we knew that the footings were a little bit shot in one of the rooms. So essentially, we expected you to come back and say, "Hey, look, the stumps need doing," which isn't totally intimidating to us.
Yep.
But when you came back and said the footings, we don't want to spend money just to get investors' money just to get back to ground zero.
Yeah.
So that, to me, that was dodging a bullet big time. But I'm so surprised by how many people buy a property without getting someone like you to come along and check it out.
Well, I know the cost of an inspection's pretty minimal to the cost of a house. So
Peace of mind, isn't it?
it's just peace of mind.
Yeah. So, Bakes, what are some of the bigger things that are sort of like obviously the footings, the underpinning? What are some of the other things that you would automatically say this is a no-go?
Well, nothing's a no-go,
Yeah.
but I think it's about people's expectations when they're buying a house.
Yep.
So everything can be repaired, everything can be fixed or rebuilt. So it's really about people that are buying being educated
Yep.
and knowing that it's going to cost them X amount of dollars to repair whatever issues are there. So I wouldn't say not buy anything.
Yeah.
I would say more about just be educated, getting
Yep.
involved.
I remember the Sydney property I bought with my wife Jane in 2001. We got the building and pest done on that property, and I remember reading it. It was like War and Peace, this document.
Yeah.
And I actually rang the building inspector, and because I sort of like the way in which it read, I felt like the place was falling over. And obviously there's an element of him needing to protect, what he's providing in terms of the report and the scope
Yep.
in terms of which he's working in, and I get all that. But I must admit, I rang him, I thought, I'm reading this, and I'm thinking this place is going to fall over. So he said, look, so it came down to a conversation that I had with him to sort of say, would you sort of buy it if you were in that position? And he sort of gave me the confidence, enough confidence without sort of putting himself in the can to say, yeah, look, it's going to be okay. And fortunately, obviously, I did buy it, and now it's gone on to be one of the best performing investment properties I've ever bought. So, that's a good news story. So when someone's getting a report, what are the things that they should be looking for inside that document?
Well, there's a lot actually. So our standard report covers a whole range of things, and when you do read it, it does feel quite cold and
Yep. Matter of fact.
there's a lot of issues with the house, but
Yep.
a lot of the issues in the reports are just general maintenance things. So building reports need to conform with Australian standards.
Yep.
So you need to cover off on a lot of things. So a lot of those things that you read in a report are just things that you would fix up
Yep.
in general day-to-day maintenance of a house.
Yep.
The things that you really want to look out for are all the footings and foundations,
Yep.
making sure that things are nice and level and
Straight.
straight.
Yep.
But cracks in walls are a good indicator of issues with foundations and water damage.
Yeah.
Making sure that the place has been built correctly in the first place. Making sure that all the members in the roof, for example, are
there.
correct, and that there's no issues up in the roof. Because a lot of people, when people go and look at places to buy, they might go to 2 or 3 opens and spend 15 minutes at a time in these opens. And there's a lot to think about. You think about whether your furniture fit, is there enough natural light, all the things that you think about when you're wanting to buy a home. And there's not enough detail gone into the actual structure itself. So what we try to do is just take that element out of it, and you can just really concentrate on, whether the home is suitable for you.
Sometimes it's not just big structural issues. Again, question with that notice, you might remember that one we did in Seddon,
Yep.
single fronted, a couple of weeks before Christmas. and there was asbestos in the roof.
Yes.
Do you remember that one?
Yep, I do.
And part of your recommendation was to get that asbestos out of the roof would just be a monumental operation. And if you don't, children who will be sleeping in those rooms will be breathing or potentially breathing those fibres. I mean, it didn't have to just be stumps or footings. It was just a precautionary tale there as well.
Yeah, well, that's right. So that particular house had been renovated, and they'd put a false ceiling in, which has covered all the asbestos. But then they'd come along and put ducted heating in and made penetrations in the asbestos in the roof. So the asbestos had been broken and hot air was being blown around. So it was just one of those things where nothing was wrong with the house, but it was just a real safety issue.
And how many mum and dad or buyers walk through a home and bring their ladder in and go up through the manhole?
Well, that's
and
right.
They don't do that, and so all they're doing is aesthetically saying, oh, this would be a great area, and they're falling in love emotionally with the asset.
Yep.
But it's all these hidden things that it's so important to get a building inspection done on a property. It's just crazy.
See the panicked look on Paul's face every time I refer to a case study. He's going, mate, I hope I can remember the one you're about to talk about.
I look at quite a few homes.
Yeah, I was going to say the same. Remember that property in Melbourne that you looked at
2
for
years
me?
ago.
Very good. So what are some of the horror stories that you see in these inspections?
Yeah, well, we see lots of things. So, again, it's about people's level of expectation. You know, I've actually started to put together some documents, and we're just calling it the Independent Property Inspection Book of Horrors. And we're actually going to try and once a week put something up on our Facebook page.
Yeah, great.
And just to try and keep it interesting. So I brought a couple of examples in. I know that it's a podcast and people can't see, but...
Well, we'll do a link. We'll link straight to it.
We can put it on our social media.
Yeah. So if I find things that are interesting, I'm going to try and take a photo. Well, I take photos of them anyway, but just put a bit of a spiel to it. Put it out there so people can start to educate themselves and have a bit of a giggle.
Because especially like the examples of the real estate agents, this thing just needs a coat of paint as an example, and that's one of the ones you've got.
Yeah, well, that's the one that I've got in front of me now. I think it was advertised just saying that it needed a coat of paint, and when you looked at it, it obviously needs a bit more.
We can confirm that.
That got you there.
Yeah.
We'll put that picture up on the website with that quote. I think it'd be good.
But so it was, the problems ran deeper than that because it had been water damaged and the footings had subsided and the bearers and joists had rotted away, and it was quite a costly thing to repair. So don't just believe what's on the real estate's advertising, basically.
Renovate or detonate, that's probably one we want to see. Now, you've just heard a drill go off, and that's because downstairs for us, we've got new tenants coming into our building, and they're obviously drilling into the wall. So we'll plough on, but just wanted to let you know that
soundproof booth, can it? Ives?
It reminds me of the ABC News Breakfast. Here's national TV, probably a viewer audience of about 2.5 million people. And one morning there's this hammer drill just going straight into the side of the building because there was a block of apartments being built next to the ABC studios and they couldn't stop it. So they just had to keep apologising. So there you were saying...
that was Paul's construction company.
Very good. Some others?
Well, another one that I've got here is about a roof that had been painted. So from the street, you looked up at the roof and it looked all beautiful and new and shiny. The potential purchase would come through and the house had been renovated and fixed up to be sold. But the people that were renovating it tried to cut some corners and save some dollars and painted the roof. And then when we got up in the roof, we sort of looked at it and we could see quite obviously from the inside that, the iron had rusted away and there were holes that had been repaired with silicone, and without an inspection you wouldn't have known that, and the cost of replacing a roof was about $10,000.
Yeah.
So that was another one that was saved.
Mate, I hate expenses getting to ground zero. What would you say to our listeners in terms of what should they look for in terms of an inspector? I mean, because what's the minimum entry level for someone who's doing your job? Is there?
Yeah. So no. The industry is not regulated, so anyone can call themselves a building inspector. But if you are getting an inspection done, you would want to really look at the qualifications of that person doing it. So you want someone that's obviously been in the industry for quite a while as a builder.
So a licensed builder is a good example.
Yeah, absolutely. Registered builder.
Registered builder, yep.
And what their background is. So, and just talking personally, our background in the building industry are renovations and extensions.
Yep.
So we've spent a lot of time actually rectifying or fixing up old homes.
Beautifying old properties. Yep.
Yeah, that's right. So all the issues that we personally see in the building inspections, we've at one time or another had to deal with those issues. So
so you've got a good sense of cost. In terms of what it costs to replace all that type of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. But getting back to Bryce's question, what do you look for? You look for someone that firstly can communicate pretty well, and so if there are issues, you can talk through them and make sure you understand, the process to getting them fixed, and the potential likely costs of getting them fixed. Someone that's, as I said, been in the industry for quite a while and had some experience dealing with the defects, not just reporting the defects, but knowing how to fix the defects.
And the consistency of their reporting, is that something you would ask? I mean, I know I would.
Yep.
Again, I don't want war and peace. I want a simple worded report that basically gives me some type of rating or whatever, and obviously that's why we've jumped on using you guys because of that.
So when we got involved in doing property inspections, there is an Australian standard to a report.
Yep.
So it was really important that we covered off on all the things that needed to be done. We try to keep ours quite simple, and we try to use really simple terms. So when you do read ours, it's an obligation to report all the defects
Absolutely.
and issues with the house. But we try to follow it up with a phone call straight after the inspection and just sort of verbalise the report with the client, just to put them at ease. And then we try to do it soon after the inspection as well, so it's fresh in our minds. And then when the report's sent out, we invite the clients to call us at any time to discuss any concerns that they have with the report.
I think it's really important because that part of my process is I talk to the client very early on and I say, look, when we get a building and pest inspection report done, their job is to tell you everything that's wrong with it. But we're looking for two key things. Is the structure sound and is it riddled with pests? And if the answer to that is no, then we just got to decipher what's critical, important or nice to do. And I think one of the reasons we like to use you, other than the fact that you know what you're doing, is because you do make that phone call to the client afterwards. And I find that just settles them because I've got a client that's locally based here in Melbourne, was holidaying in India, received the pest report, not from you, from an alternative contractor, and they just in reading the report, they just went, should we be buying this?
Yeah. Borer activity. Period. And that just needs to be defined and explained.
But particularly in a pest report, it says these are conducive conditions for termites. It doesn't mean there is and has been in the past. It just means if left unmonitored, there's an issue going forward.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I think what you do in terms of chatting and probably recommending anyone around the country who's looking for someone, ask someone if they're prepared to have that conversation with you after they've done that, because it's going to give you peace of mind.
What's involved in your fee? Is it just the report, or do I get to talk to the person who's actually gone through the property? Because some of these bigger companies can do literally, hundreds of them a week. And if you can't get in front of the person who's done the report and you've been pushed back to a call centre, that's just not on. You want to be able to speak to the person who's been through the property and have a look at their qualifications to be able to do that. Again, it's specialisation. We're big on finding professionals who specialise in what they do and they're best of breed at their practice.
Yep, absolutely.
So this one looks like there's some interesting
more horror stories.
So this was just another one that we went out and had a look at. The property had been rewired. And I'm not an electrical inspector, I'm a building inspector, but if anything raises red flags with me, I strongly suggest that you get the appropriate person in to look at it. And just looking at the picture, it's quite obviously not
I don't know what
installed.
You're talking about.
You know what, it reminds me of walking through cities in Asia where you've got wires connected to wires, like there's just been a hatch job done. It's almost like they're bootlegging the electricity from their neighbour, and that's what these wires look like. So again, we'll post that on the website. But it's again, mum and dad or a person's not going to get up in the roof. They're not going to see all this type of stuff.
No.
So for the fees that you're paying, at less than 0.001% usually of the value of the property, what's going to be at risk? Well, another rewiring exercise at $10,000 or whatever it may be. Because as you rightly point out, everything potentially can be fixed up. At a cost.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
What's your feedback in terms of, do you know when you read a report and then, you can't get under the floor, you can't see the ceiling, and you put that sort of in there to say, hey, look, these things weren't seen prior to making this recommendation.
Yeah.
What recommendation can you give to someone who's engaging a builder who can't see those things as to whether or not they should go ahead? Do you sort of give them, hey, look, in my experience, I think this could be a concern that I haven't seen it, or in my experience, I think it should be okay?
Yeah, so getting under the floor is a good one, because a lot of the places, particularly in the inner west in Melbourne, where I do a lot of work, the houses are built on stumps but sit quite close to the ground, so you can't get under a lot of the houses. So you can't actually determine the quality of the bearers and joists and things like that. But there's a lot of telltale signs as you walk through the house above the floor.
The bounce.
A bit of springing in the floor.
Yep.
You can look at doors in door jambs as well. So if you look at the gap across the top of a door, it might be
That's a great
3 or
goal.
4 mil in one corner, and in the other corner it might be 15 mil, which suggests that the house has moved and they've just planed the door to
Yep.
suit the
To
shape
make
of
it
the door
look-
frame.
Yep.
Cracks above windows and doors, and cornice cracking is another one which suggests there's been some movement. Skirting boards that separate from floorboards is another one. So if you've got gaps, there's a range of telltale signs that suggest that there's some issues below the floor. So you don't physically need to be under there.
And you just bring it to their attention that those are the signs you've seen.
Yep.
Veronica on the show, she always carries a marble, and I thought she was losing them at first, but mate, she just sits it and she puts it there and she just sees where it rolls, just to get her idea of where the floors are level on them.
Pitch on the floor. That's a great little idea. There's a lot of frustration for new buyers who are coming into the market, especially in an auction market like we see in Melbourne and Sydney, whereby they're juggling up how many building and pest inspections they do because they're missing out at auction and all of that. Now, part of that problem is because they probably haven't comped the property well.
Yep.
And you never get a bargain in a busy market like we are. You're going to pay fair market price, and in some cases in Melbourne and Sydney, they may be paying emotional price on top of that. So when someone was to ring you or any sort of building inspector, when do you think it's the right time for them to sort of say, yeah, we'll get one done? I mean, do you say to people, if you're only in your early due diligence stage, let's not do one yet? Or is there any sort of information you provide in that sense?
So the building reports happen pretty quickly.
Yep.
We respond to things as quickly as we can.
Yep.
So, if something's going to auction on the Saturday and a purchaser comes across it on the Wednesday, for example, and says, oh my God, I need this property, then we'll do everything we can to get through and have them a report to them by the Saturday.
And that's probably because they've done their due diligence and then, we are going to go after this one.
Yep.
But they'll leave it to the last minute, so
everything's a rush on a
you're
Thursday
always
and
a
Friday.
scramble.
Paul sees another call from me and he goes, oh my goodness.
And I thought I had a free afternoon on Friday to do some paperwork. Oh, I know where I'm going now.
I try and leave it late in the campaign. So if we're going to auction on the Saturday, I try and, you'd probably want me to go earlier, but definitely in that last week, because I'm checking the campaign and I'm making sure we're in the game. I've done my comps, but I don't necessarily want the client to, I think your cost is exceptionally reasonable for the price of the asset they're going to buy, but I don't want them to keep spending it.
Yep.
So I try and keep it late, but conscious of the fact I never try and do it on a Thursday or Friday. It's usually the Wednesday, Tuesday or the Wednesday of the last week of the campaign.
I was just going to bring up, we've talked a lot about people that are just buying houses to move into, but another aspect of a building inspection is, they might be looking at remodelling a house or doing a renovation and an extension.
Great point.
So, quite often we'll go through and look at a property, and I've, spoken with the client prior, and they've said, look, we want to put a new bathroom in, we want to put a new kitchen in, we need an extra living room on the back of the house. So I'd like you to look at the property and, talk us through any pitfalls that, we might have in trying to do these things. So it's not just about looking at the asset as it is now, it's also about future planning as well.
And that's a really great point. I remember one of the properties that I got you through, and one of the things, it was very much a renovator delight, so we were going to basically extend on the back. And one of the things you and I were talking about was where the plumbing is actually located at that point in time. Relocating plumbing can get very expensive, but if the footprint's there or the plumbing is in that spot and you can redesign, there's going to be some savings, as opposed to, oh no, I want the kitchen to be on the other side of the house and there's no plumbing or drainage or any of that type of thing. So again, another great point, Bakes, in terms of what you're talking about.
Yeah, because a lot of our clients are looking to add value to the portfolio. So really good point on how you could do that. So any other sort of horror stories that we should be aware of?
Oh, we've got a few.
Is it the big three: roof, plumbing, wiring, or probably the four, and then just the stumps, the foundation? Are they really the big four?
Yeah, so that's the structural aspect of it. So we do a few reports. One of them is just a structural report. So for someone that they walk through the house and they know that they need to do work, and generally people just want to spend money on cosmetic things. They like things to look nice, and they like nice
hide all the
fittings and fixtures and all that sort of stuff. But it's really important that the structure is sound before you start spending money above the ground. If the structure's not sound, and you spend $50,000 on fitting it out beautifully and it moves, then you're just going back and redoing things.
And I'm looking at a picture here of basically two sticks holding up some foundations under a house, and that's another classic one. So by all means, check out the website, guys. There's some gold on here.
That's
it's
incredible.
Really good. A couple of sticks will do the job. That might do the job in terms of stopping the squeaks for when people are walking through there. But obviously, that's insufficient in terms of underpinning a house.
Yeah. So I think that one there, the people that were selling the house did a bit of an owner build and cut some corners and didn't use
No, surely not.
use the correct size joists for the floor there. They span too far and there was a bit of spring in the floor, and that's how they rectified the situation with a few bits of timber.
Creative, very creative.
You knew you were coming in today to have a chat with us. Is there anything that you wanted to sort of let the listeners know, in terms of some of the do's and don'ts in what you do?
Look, I think it's really important, and obviously I'm
but
self-serving here, but I think it's really important that you do a building inspection.
Yeah.
For a lot of people that don't necessarily know anything about houses or renovating, or houses that have been renovated, or even new builds for that matter.
Absolutely.
For the cost of a building inspection, it's peace of mind,
Yeah.
and it also can be used as a negotiating tool as well. So, if you know that there's issues to fix up, and not necessarily at auction, because you've just got to fight it out at auction. But, if you're negotiating a purchase and you've established that there's, $20,000 worth of repairs, then, you can take that in as a negotiating tool.
And I think that's a great segue into, some of the stuff we've been able to do when we do have subject to building, subject to pest, we can actually negotiate on price. Isn't that right, Bryce?
Yeah, we do it a lot in Brisbane, to be honest. Everything we do is subject to, unlike Melbourne, where we have to do DD prior. In Brisbane, we do it all on option. Buy it and then we do everything later. And many times we've come back and said, righto,
Here's a list of issues.
For us to satisfy the BNP, or it might just be just simple leverage, not monetary. It's just like, okay, for us to satisfy the building and pest clause, we need you to rectify these 7 items. And the vendors motivate, and they might just be, that electrical wire looks a little unsafe, and they call an electrician in, and they just do a few of these things, a couple $100, or it means that our client doesn't have to worry about it. So we do use it as leverage. We don't have that tool available to us as much in Melbourne because
the market's hot,
and the agent says, "Well, don't turn up."
Yeah.
So,
I think that's a great bargaining tool. I think it's one of the reasons why if I really like the property and I've done my other due diligence, I would definitely want to have that pre-auction. I also want to start the agent guessing in terms of my position on the property as well, because if I've shown a bit of interest and I've made a few calls, if I come back and say, look, building pest wasn't great, here's some problems, so they probably then don't necessarily see me as what they call an A grade buyer, but I'm still there. And if the property passes into me, that's in my war chest in terms of what I can bring out and sort of say, hang about, but this is the reason why I'm steadfast in not paying another cent for this. My guys are going to have to spend $8,000 on fixing up all these problems that we've found with the property.
Information is gold there. So, in closing, we've got listeners that are about to walk through a property this weekend, and what's your top sort of 2 or 3 things that they should do? They walk through and they do what? You've talked about the underpinning, you've talked about the door jambs. What are the top 3 things they should do as they walk through?
The top 3 things, probably as you walk through in the floors, foundations are really important. Just get up on the balls of your feet and just do a little bit of bouncing and see if there's any spring under your feet. That's one, and that's a really simple thing to do. The second one would be look for any cracking above doors and windows or below doors and windows. And a lot of times people have beautified their house by painting and patching things, but if you sort of scratch the surface a little bit, you can actually see where existing cracks were. That's a key sign of some movement as well.
Yep.
And the third one, the roof, the external cladding of your roofing is really important, because water is the root of all evil in building.
Because you never know where it comes from.
No, that's right.
In fact, I had a water problem in one of my properties last year. Yeah. And I've got a rooftop garden terrace on this property, and the membrane, if that breaks, effectively I'm going to get water right throughout it. But all this water was coming to one corner, and we couldn't work out how it was happening on big downpours. And at the end of the day, I had to get a waterproofer in, and we looked at it, and we've got it solved. But you can have it draining out through the bathroom, but it's probably coming out through the third bedroom. It's just finding that gravity is finding its way
lowest
out.
point.
Lowest point. So it's a great tip, Bakes.
Another one as we wrap up, in the age of television shows being all about renovating,
yes,
Have you done many inspections of the flipper, the renovator, the person that's trying to do a quick job? And if you have, should we be beware of those? You know, are they covering lots of? Is it a?
Look, I think the building industry is pretty well regulated. If you do anything substantial, you need to have building permits and all the regulatory checks.
Yep.
It's really just your home handyman,
The cosmetic.
fix up. That's the one you got to be wary of. So a lot of times you can tell the difference between something that's done professionally and something that's been done by the weekend warrior.
Yep.
So any red flags, I'd definitely get a building inspection.
Any obvious things that the layman could see from the weekend warrior that you'd see naturally and we probably wouldn't?
Just the way things are finished off. So the way skirting boards are joined. Architraves around doors. If it's not done professionally, things don't line up, and all of a sudden, the little things raise red flags. And as soon as a red flag is raised, you look closely into things. Yeah,
There's a certain way to build, isn't there? Joist, this, that, all the other thing.
Yep.
One last thing I wanted to just quickly ask. Do a fly around the country. A building inspection in different states. So I remember I'm sort of clutching at straws here, but I think the Brisbane stuff, what's that, around 500 for building and pest. Sydney, you're probably around 600, 650. Melbourne, around that sort of 600 mark, fair to say. And in Adelaide, probably that sort of 500, 550 mark. So just to give those listeners an idea of roughly what you're up for. So bugger all, basically, is what it is. And it's really important for people because people might have first new to property, they're thinking, it's just like $1,000, $2,000, $3,000. It's under $1,000. And in most cases, it's under, a depreciation schedule is usually around $700 or $800. So, do it. And if it means you have to do it on 3 or 4 properties, for peace of mind, it just makes perfect sense that you'd get your building and pest done.
But make sure you know how much the property is legitimately going to go for. Otherwise, you might be spending 4, 5, 6, 7 times the building inspector. Because Paul runs a legitimate business, but he doesn't want to be dealing with the same clients 4 and 5 and 6 times, do you, mate? You just want to make sure they get what they want. Well, there you go, folks. There's some very good tips on how to look out for some stuff when you're going through properties this weekend for yourself, just to check it out. And you can also protect yourself by getting an inspection done prior to putting in a contract or prior to binding yourself. And of course, I'm happily using Paul for all of my clients, happy to endorse him. We're going to put a link up on our website for the Independent Property Inspections Melbourne. He got a highly recommended, Ben.
Investor Choice Awards, highly recommended result, which is fantastic. So. One of the best in Melbourne. No, and he's a Richmond supporter, so
that's right.
He's had more frustration than what we've had in the last 20 years, but that's all right. We'll get over that.
Oh, see that jibe then? just a cheap one.
Well, what do we call it now? Was the Collie Wobbles, now is it the Tiger Wobbles?
Oh, there we go.
Well, don't worry, I got it for 20
Mate, you got front teeth, that's all right. Most of you got front teeth.
So I would love to see us win a final though.
Yes, it would be.
Mate, I follow Fremantle, I hear you. So, all right, mate, let's sign off somewhere around the world.
The best part of my time here
is the best
doing
time.
this.
It's very productive.
So we're into Thailand. We're into Thai. So back to the, Happy New Year to everyone. We'll sort of bring the music back into the game and see if we can get this.
Hey, Ivis, as a property investor,
he makes it very ordinary.
As a producer, with his own little twerk. Come on, mate, where are we going?
Laguna, Thai, Laguna. Sounds like Laguna.
Sounds like he's talking to his young children, isn't it?
Every time. Laguna.
No French accent. So there you go, folks. Until next week, Laguna. And Happy New Year. See you next week. Bye now.